Hey guys, is there a bigger attendance of the meeting or is it going to be just us three?
Hi, Kraton. Yeah, usually we have a host that would join usually, but he's absent today.
Is
Uh
it Honkai or is it Stefan usually?
it's on Hong Cai. Uh, sorry, let me double check. Very
If
bad, but
it's
really
if
sorry
they're
about
not,
that.
sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, it's all right. I was just checking name. Really sorry about that. I'm really bad with names. Usually it's
Yeah, it's okay. I think it's normally Stefan, but if he's not here, I normally I'm the host. But it doesn't really matter. If Stefan is not here, the only thing we cannot do is we cannot share our screens, I think. Other than that, it doesn't matter that much.
Fine with me. Um, and
Maybe we
should
can just
we? Yeah, we
quickly
can just get
discuss
going
this. Yeah.
if you
sure.
want. Um, Shen, do you want to make the case or try to? I know you had the most details on the chat, and
Yeah. So I probably need to reply to Kahiro-kun's questions, but it's not the core issue we want to discuss as I understand. So the situation is that we wanted to be able to have a way to add some cluster specific information in the cluster in the authentication part of the cluster profile API, so that uh, so basically, we want to provide a way for people to specify cluster-specific CLI arguments or environment variables that can be supplied to the execute plugin when the authentication flow runs. I understand the current source of confusion comes from the fact that in the cluster struct there's already an extension field that allows specification of the cluster specific info. The reason why, aside from the fact that the interface is a little bit difficult to use, is that I think the most obvious concern at this moment is that that field, the usage of that field is purely optional, right? So if we set that field, there will be an environment variable Kubernetes underscore execute underscore info that's being set in the environment. But the tricky part is that basically execute plugins are not supposed to recognize this environment variable. The setup of this environment variable is purely optional, right? If we set the provider cluster info flag to false, which is the default value, then this environment variable won't be set at all. So execute plugins are not supposed to recognize that environment variable, and even for those who does recognize that, say for example, Azure's Kubernetes login binary, it will only read some information from it. It's not supposed to actually respect to retrieve information from all the fields. Kubernetes login, for example, only read this variable for the API version. It won't touch anything that related to the extension part. It won't read, say, additional parameters from the struct. It's a purely optional experience. For the single cluster scenario, this is fine because for a single cluster scenario, we can just directly add additional CLI argument or add environment variable. It's totally supported. For the multi-cluster scenario, however, it's really difficult to do so. So unless the execute plugin in use can actually read the information from the environment variable, and provided that that variable can be set in the environment, there's virtually no way for people to supply any cluster specific parameters to the execute plugin. So that's why we wanted to add this additional info field to the API. Qiujian suggested that we use a separate field rather than reserve another name under the extension field to avoid any conflicts with existing KEPs. Because in KP 541, a name has already been reserved, right, for additional information targeted at execute plugins, and it's kind of we don't want Jie mentioned that we probably don't want to fight over that. It's a little bit easier for us to have a separate field in the cluster profile API, which brings us to the discussion we have today. Yeah. So I'm really hoping to hear about your thoughts on the subject matter.
Awesome. Thanks for the summary. I think that's great. And I agree. This is mostly about like passing information from the CP to the exec provider.
Yeah.
However that's done, right? One of the thing I don't really understand is when you say that the providers like they don't use the environment variable Kubernetes exec info. Is like if they need information from it, wouldn't they read it? And if they don't read it, it's because they don't need that extra information and they don't expect extra information. So like, okay, even if we passed additional information in some way, if they don't need it, they're not going to read it. So it's not a problem. So if they don't read it in the first place, how is that a problem if they don't
Yeah,
read it?
I get the point. I guess the tricky part, I was thinking about exactly the same thing the other day. This is truly a multi-cluster specific information because most execute plugins today, they don't really think about a multi-cluster scenario. It's supposed to be a single cluster thing, right? So, so basically, for the single cluster, you can just specify another CLI argument or just in environment variable. It's already in the API. There's no reason to touch the extensions, right? You can just add an additional thing to that part, to the call, and it will just work. But for the multi-cluster part, there's no way for us to specify that. You can't say for example in Azure scenario, the Kubernetes login will expect say a client ID or an audience that's specific to the cluster. Now, in a single cluster environment, I will just add this to the Kubernetes login by input, and it will just work just fine. But for the multi-cluster scenario, there's no way for me to do that. At least there's no easy way for me to do that. I have to patch in the code. So, for example, I need to instead of using the community library, I need to write my own implementation. So that I can add that part, and it has to be hard coded in the code, so it's a little bit difficult to use.
So is the problem that it's part of the exec info and not an argument? Like you cannot configure it as an argument or the environment variable of your choice. Is that the problem ultimately?
Uh, I don't think so. I mean, technically speaking, I mean, the data can be supplied in any form, technically speaking, right? It's just the most execute plugins will just read from the CLI arguments or the environment variable.
But exec info is an environment variable. So if you control the code, right, then you would just read the exec info and it would be there, right?
Uh, 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 I mean, like I mentioned, the presence of the variable is purely optional. And also that variable is not really like it contains it contains only exclusively the additional information, right? That variable actually contains everything about that cluster. It has the server address, it has a CA bundle, it has a lot of extra stuff in that. You can probably see that from the client Go code. So it's
Is it that? I don't get it. It's like then that means they have to parse that environment variable and
yeah.
then they get the data from there, right? I mean, I understand the API is like a little cumbersome, but it does the
I
job,
mean,
right? It
do you
passes the
want
data, right?
it does pass the data. I mean, do we expect it's pretty much like saying I mean the use case is real, right? Say if I want to integrate Kubernetes login in our use case or any execute plugin that reads cluster specific information, unless it supports the Kubernetes execute info based flow, it cannot work with our current approach, right? There's no way for us to do that.
Yeah, but even if we added an extra field, then you would need to modify that plugin as well to read that extra field, right?
But no,
Whether
no,
it's
no.
an argument or something like
Actually,
that, right?
I'm more thinking like, that might be the part that I wasn't being very clear about. Really sorry about that. The field that the additional info we are proposing to add will have a two specific reserved names. The format, the actual format can be the actual structure can be changed. I understand that it might be not be optimal. So we are actually proposing a way for people to say any data under that specific name will be added to the execute plugin as additional CLI argument. It will be merged with the argument field in the execute config struct in the community library input. So basically we are reserving special.
That's what you're trying to do. Is like you're trying basically. If I understand here, what you're saying is like you're trying to make it arguments because
Yeah.
arguments are
So instead of
much
additional
simpler, and
info,
I
it
think
can be, yeah, it can be just
basically you want arguments to be
argument.
passable from the CP, yeah,
Mm.
and that way instead of in that big blob of exec info environment variable, you
Yeah.
want to be able to control the environment variables and the arguments as well from the cluster profile.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could say its control is more like merging.
Right. Yeah. You want to add data in them, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's because you have plugins that recognize. Okay, in some cases, yeah, basically they've put cluster info in our. You want to put some cluster info in the arguments or the environment variables, and not in this one.
Yeah.
And because in kubeconfig, basically people haven't made that difference too clear because it's all in the same place. So it doesn't like whatever. Yeah, it hasn't made really a problem. Yeah, I see what you're saying. The part that scares me, honestly, is not necessarily like I think the ask is fair, though. Now you would be mixing arguments, and the merging could be awkward, and like who wins, and if there's conflicts, and is there an ordering, like who goes first or whatever? Because sometimes CLI they take the last flag of the name or something like that. So there could be some interesting aspects there. Also mixing the source of truth, like now you're merging, so it actually comes from two places. The part that worries me, to be honest, is the deviation from the standard. And like we would have some fairly different way of handling exec then. Well, not fairly different ways, like slightly different ways, like with a little bit more things than what the SIG auth way, the kubeconfig way does it. That's the only thing that kind of worries me. And I wonder if it's like a problem is the design of the plugins that use the data, and they should technically, like if they wanted more data about the cluster, that should have been in the cluster, not in the arguments or in the environment variables. It should be in the cluster info, because that's what the provide cluster info field, right, controls, and it controls if that environment variable is set or not, which is exactly like what's interesting here. That's why I've been pushing back. It's like I feel we have a good way, and it sounds like a bad plugin design in some way.
I mean, I did see in the code comments that, I mean, the reason why the provide cluster info flag is there was because there are cases where the environment variable cannot be easily set, right? Because people are worried about CA bundle being too large. And there are cases where people don't want to save that information as an environment variable. So those are also very fair asks, in my own opinion. Yeah, and besides that, aside from that, there are really not much way for us to share information, to pass information to the execute plugin. So yeah, but I totally see your concern as well. It's just that I'm guessing that most execute plugins will not read extension data from the environment variable for very fair reasons. That wasn't the most convenient interface, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, this interface is weird. Like the fact that you have to convert it is very weird. That it doesn't match on the input and the output. Basically, it's very weird. True. Is there? Do you have an example? So for GKE, we didn't have that problem because I think GKE doesn't need the the plugin doesn't need the cluster info, I think, because we just use workflow identity and we just get a token, pass it, and I think the exact library things assembles whatever was in the cluster info and whatever token was returned, but the plugin doesn't need the token. So we don't have that problem. Which plugin and how you're writing your plugin so that you need it? Was that the AWS where you need like the region or something?
For the AKS, so we basically AKS provides a Kubernetes login plugin, and there are cases where it needs the expected audience, and there are cases where it might need a specific client ID for that cluster.
Okay, and those are things that the cluster provides, not the controller manager, right? They're not static. It's not static for all clusters. It's going to vary
It's
for every single cluster is going
vary
to have
by
a different
cluster.
value. Because audience sounds like something that could be the same for all clusters. No? Or am I
AKS
wrong?
AKS has a separate clause, right? For some cloud, for the public cloud, it's the same value. But for clusters in those more isolated environments, it does use a different value. So it's a yeah.
So you'd want to convey that, like, or even if you had that statically passed, you'd want to convey, oh, this is a local cluster versus a other cluster thing.
Yeah, it's not easy to do that in the. He said,
Yeah, you'd have to use the extension. You would have to set an extension that says, hey, this is that kind of cluster. All right. So if we were to do that, one of my questions right now would be, can we get this without modifying the protocol too much? So we stay somewhat close to the kubeconfig one, and potentially can we merge back with their stuff, or is it just the way we use their stuff, or is it?
Yeah, there was another one of the earlier prototypes we have was that we reserve another name under the current extension field. So basically that we treat the data under that name specifically so that we will retrieve that data in specific format and add it to the CL argument. This won't require any changes to the cluster profile API. But Chujian raises a very valid concern that it will be basically fighting over existing KEPs, and that kind of reservation, I'm not 100% sure it's appropriate. I understand Chujian's concern is actually quite valid. That's why the current PR it's added as a separate field. But if you wanted to make another reservation, I'm not 100% sure if that's acceptable in the community.
So that would be a new extension name,
Yeah.
like type, and then so we would still write in extensions, right? And it's just the way that extension would be used. It would pass additional arguments and and environment variables, kind of like, oh, we'll let you do your, basically we'll take another args and env field.
The data under those specially reserved names will be handled separately in a very specific manner.
I think I like the fact that it uses extension because the API is like fully backward and forward, backward compatible. And it basically is just saying, hey, we're going to have our own extension. That way, it can be extended. I don't think that's too bad. And I think the only thing we would need to clear for me is it safe to take args from the extension? Oh, sorry, from the cluster profile. Is it safe to take arguments from the cluster profile? That would be my only is it fine? And does it mud the source of truth of who does arguments? I think that's the only thing I would want to clear after that. That's the one I'm not sure about. Yeah, because an additional extension is totally fine. And let's say we take that extension and we convert it to args and env. Okay, good. I think that's fairly straightforward. People write the extension, they can add more things. That sounds fair. And it's pretty much a pattern they already use, so that already exists. Can we pass that? I guess it's like, do you think there would be a way to misuse arguments via a cluster profile to make the controller exec things that it should not? It's like, because the controller controls the binary name, it controls where the binary is, it controls a bunch of arguments, it controls a bunch of environment variables. If we added more arguments, would it change the way? It's like, is there a risk to the controller that the cluster profile could mess up with it? Because currently there's not really. I mean, well, they give information, they self-identify, right? They self-give their, oh, this is my server and this is my CA, and then it generates a token for it. There's no trust required, right, of the cluster profile. It just generates a config. It could validate it more, but it's not really more than that. Here, if we took arguments, is there a risk that the cluster could mess? Imagine a flag that says -- prod or something like that. It's like, could it turn on -- prod equal true, or like no dry run, or something like that? Or I'm thinking out loud. That could be a problem.
I mean, from an absolute perspective, it's not 100% bulletproof, that's for sure. Do you want something like a wet list on the controller side? That'd be something a little bit weird, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the problem ultimately what we might end up with, the same way we have to provide cluster info, there might be a similar like leverage or like use cluster profile extension, and only if that's true, then you can feed the arguments, and you're like, well, I'll trust the cluster profile to give me the right arguments. But that's the only part that would be worrying me after that. That extra that leverage we give to the cluster profile that maybe they could mess with, because now they have control over the exec. Before that, they don't. Like today, the cluster profile doesn't have control over the exec to say, hey, this is the provider I would want, and here's my information about myself. They don't control at all how the exec is run, right?
Yeah.
And that would change that. It's not necessarily, basically it's not additional info, it's understanding of what plugging is running and controlling how the plugging is running from the cluster profile. See where I'm going with this? Is like,
yeah,
we're like this.
It's deviating from the single source of responsibility thing, right? Because
right. And that goes back to my previous point, is like, all those things that you've been talking about, maybe they should be cluster infos and not arguments in the first place, right?
I mean, technically
because isn't the audience kind of like, oh, it's some information about the cluster that dictates how the audience should be, right?
But it's a
I know it's not exactly what you want to hear. It's just what
it's all right. It's all right. I do get that. I mean, to me, let's say, suppose I have a execute plugin that does support the Kubernetes underscore execute underscore info environment variable, and it does retrieve data from that. And provided that our community library updated to support the passing in of that data, then this issue would be the same, right?
Sorry. Yeah, it's passed as information, but it's up to the plugin to read it and do whatever it wants with it. It's just information. It's not controlling how the plugin runs at all. Right? It doesn't control the exact flow. I guess everything's information at the end.
I mean, it's the same as argument, right? If the plugin chooses to trust it, then
Right. But yeah. But if the plugin chooses to, but the plugin, let's say a bad CP could control arguments that the plugin doesn't expect the CP to control, right? Something like that could be, right? Like that prod thing I was talking about. Maybe prod should be only said control. The controller manager should be the one deciding, oh, it's a prod or non-prod thing I want to do. And if the CP comes in and override that maybe is not good, right? Whereas if it's like field, or maybe we would have to restrict what arguments the CP can override, and like they all have to be prefixed with something or something like that.
Yeah, additional is basically some protocols that allow people to say only those arguments can be overridden, and we only accept values, that kind of thing.
But then it becomes more complicated, I feel. Right, and then it becomes more complicated, and very likely either the names will be different, or it become. Now we're gonna have a bunch of like argument declaration.
I'm guessing cell expressions will join this discussion very soon.
Oh God, I definitely don't want that. Ugh. Yeah. Yeah.
Or we could just, I mean, to solve this in a simple manner, we can just provide a flag in the community library saying that this will accept additional arguments, or this won't accept additional arguments. It's a very brutal and not very elegant solution, but it provides some level of control.
This is similar to the provide cluster info. This is like, hey, allow override of. It could be, yeah. I guess it could be on the. It could be on the. So on the provider side, we would have an extra field. So the controller would set and say, I allow, in general, for this kind of plugin, I allow override of arguments from cluster profile, and here's the list of arguments I would allow overriding. And that's something only our library understands at this point. Then,
yeah,
it wouldn't be, and we would reserve an extra extension, and we would have this extra field, and then we would merge into the args and env. Actually, more than merge, we would override, right? I mean, well, override if they have a similar name, right?
Yeah.
Or should we fail this similar name? I don't know. Some merging rules we need to.
Overriding would be a little bit too much. Addition sounds a little bit better.
Yeah, but if it's two things with the same name, it's like an environment variable, right? They can only be one with the same name. So which one wins?
Oh, the priority. Yeah, it's complicating the API design.
But we would need to come up with something here, right? I don't want to be that. I don't think I want that to be customizable. That sounds like too many knobs. We should pick one and move on.
Yeah, right? I guess a more logical solution would be something like, if we allow the presence of additional stuff, then the one on the cluster profile should prevail. If you don't want this to happen, we should reject all the additional info altogether. It's
Yeah, because since we've since we've asked the controller to allow list the ones that it allows the cluster profile to set, I think it's fair to say that whenever the cluster profile sets it, it should take over. I think that's fair.
yeah, all provide different levels. We can allow addition, allow overriding, or deny all, that kind of thing. Basically provide 3 different levels.
Nah, I think you're getting like
But
it's great, but it's too much control. It's going to be annoying to understand, right? And like now you have to learn like, oh, there's a bunch of rules and whatnot. I think we just say, whatever is in CP overrides what's in the regular in the provider, then then we say, oh, it's fine because the provider had to allow list the fields anyway. So the provider is well aware that those explicit fields are likely to be overridden by CPs. I think that would be the say is like, and sucks on the provider is like, it's dumb on them if they set a field and they say, oh, the CP can override it, then that's their fault for allowing the CP to override it. I mean, I think that's the intention at that point. So yeah, I think that's what I would do is like let the CP override it and just have the CP win if it's the same name. Okay, so I think there's a path forward. What I would really recommend, and I don't know if you did that in the PR or just in the chat, but if you could document your use case, be like, hey, this is what we had with the kube config. We're trying to leverage an existing plugin, which it sounds like what you're doing, but those plugins take n and then args, and those are important to us, and for that reason, we need to have CP set it. I wonder if you'll still get the arguments like, hey, there should be cluster info, there should be invent args, but that's another problem. And then we can move into like propose thing where, okay, let's add an extension and let's add the allow CP to override args and eggs. And here's the allow list of args, here's the allow list of env, and have this added to our side of the library. I don't think we need to. Yeah, and we might have to reach out to, or maybe I'm trying to see how we'll integrate that in the existing thing. It might be side by side, or maybe a struct would be adopting the struct of the SIG auth, I mean the kube config, and then the other one, and add our thing to it. And basically would be forked at that point. Well, not forked, but inherited. Yeah. So I would suggest writing the proposal. I don't know if you had it.
I have a PR prepared, but based on what we discussed today, it might need some revising to make it more relevant.
I would try to argue also the security aspect if you can a little bit. Like, hey, that the reason we put the allow list is blah blah blah. That's also dictates on the override side. And yeah, I think that's it. That would be my comment, and then we can see what the rest of the group thinks. Otherwise, I think I'm fine with it. Ultimately, it adds a little bit of complexity to it, and my hunch is like maybe they should have been in the exec info in the first place, but the exec info is a weird thing. I don't understand why they didn't put the extension as part of the thing they sent to the plugin on the wire in STDN. I don't know why it's not going through STDN. It feels to me that it should have been on STDN. Maybe I'll double check, because like I don't understand why the cluster info only goes into an environment variable when it should be in STDN. You're getting an STDN message. Throw everything you got in there. It's like that's the request. So I'll double check on the protocol, but I think that's what. This is overall my position, my feeling about it. I hope that's fair. I think it ultimately it should get you what you want, and we can make sure we cover all corners, and we should be good to go after that.
So much for now. Oh, just one quick clarification. So, Carlton, from your opinion, you would still prefer if you reserve new names under the extension field rather than adding a new field to the cluster profile struct, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds more standard with the exec, right? Because if we put a new field in cluster profile, let me think. That means now a library, when it reads the cluster profile for this, it would modify. Is it the same? I mean, it keeps the exec info together. Because if our library read the cluster profile when it processes that, it adds this info.
One is more conformant, more aligned with the existing KP
Right.
effect. And the other one is more, well, it's a very flexible approach that allows, I think you should be able to add more stuff.
Yeah, it's more cluster profile friendly in one case, in the other case, it's more like exec conformant. Given it's explicitly passing data to the exec, I think it still belongs to like the provider, the credentials provider config, which is in like which is formatted today with the plain exec format, all the cluster info. So I think it would belong in this area and not as properties or other fields. Because especially if you have let's say you had two providers for whatever reason that you want to support for a cluster profile, if they take different arguments, then it could be confusing and all that. Yeah, so I think it still belongs there, and then extension is the most natural way to add it to that structure. It gives us the most. It's intended to give us flexibility, so I think we can leverage this flexibility. So yeah, I have a feeling this is the way. So yeah, that's my take for now.
Sure. Yeah.
Could be wrong, but
yeah. Let me revise the PR to add the use case and add the security concerns, and then I guess this will be enough to facilitate the next step of discussions.
I think so. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Ryan, did you have any comment on that? Do you agree with everything's been said?
Yeah, I don't. I just I don't have a strong opinion on multiple things. So as long as it works, it works. Right. This is kind of just we design something that works. There are many ways to do it. Yeah.
And I think even while we work on this, there are ways to make it work with the current setup, right? I know it's not pretty. You won't get it as arguments RN. You still get it as that exec info environment variable, but you can still edit the plugin to make that work, right?
No, I thought we can't. We need to either change. So there are three ways. We either add a new field, we repurpose the current exec field, or we add an implementation. We change the library. What if we don't do any?
I mean, the library doesn't support extensions yet, right? So yes, it would need, but like that guy that was on the chat, I remember, is it Kahi something? He added the translation, right?
The third approach is that we instead of providing a complete standard library, we can just provide an interface so everyone implements things of their own. Yeah.
For which part? Sorry, I missed.
Oh, so basically we allow like kind of like a overriding thing in the library side so that they can read stuff from the cluster profile, say based on a label to add stuff, that kind of thing. But
Oh,
it,
interesting. But then no, well, that's not gonna work because remember the goal is that you don't control the library as a like I'm assuming you're a plugin writer, right? As a case, you're a plugin writer. You want to provide credentials, so you're going to write a plugin, and you're likely going to provide the cluster profile. You don't want to give them a custom library here. That was like a thing. Like because when, for example, Argo CD comes in, those guys they want to leverage the library, and then the config comes from the config of the provider comes from somewhere else. So I don't think you'd want override like code wise here in the library. I think sharing the library is important. I mean, the library implements the protocol, so sharing the same protocol, which basically means no overriding. No, but my what I was saying is like with the current plugin you got, you could technically put a wrapper around it that takes the extension stuff and translates it into the arguments you're expecting, right? As a way to pass the problem just for now.
Yeah.
So instead of using the current plugin you got for kubeconfig, you'd have to touch up on it for sure to read from the environment the exec info. It's not pretty, but it unblocks you, I hope, right?
Yeah.
So just try to offer that as an unblocking while the cap moves and the discussion moves forward. Maybe not the final form. And anyway, you'll support. You can support your cluster profiles, and then when be like, oh, this is the old way of doing things, a new way. Since cluster profiles support multiple providers, you could be like, oh, this is the old way, with the extension stuff, blah blah blah, and then now you can use the new provider and the more recent provider, and the cluster profile would say, oh, I support both of them, something. Be that. Something like that. You have a migration path at least. That's why I wanted to allow multiple credentials providers per cluster profile. Anyway, I'm gonna double check on what goes on STDN because it kind of bums me that the cluster info is not in there. Because if it was in there, then it wouldn't be a problem really, because then it's just a matter of reading the cluster info from STDN.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna double check on that. So this environment variable approach is weird as hell.
Yeah, not the prettiest interface.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. Why would you do that? It's like it might have come as an afterthought. It's like, oh, the plugins didn't need the cluster info for a long time or something. I don't know. Yep. Ryan, did you want to talk naming if we're good on this topic? Or is this not enough people to argue naming? And
yeah,
naming
thing is more subjective. So, but I think we discussed a bit there. So, yeah, I felt like it's just kind of not what it actually is. So it's
I call them credentials providers. Like I felt they're providing credentials, but like the plugins are providing credentials, not in the cluster profile, but you configure the providers in the cluster profile. So it made sense to me. But obviously, it's like it could have been room for improvement, and I'm just scared of changing it now that there are a couple things that use it. If it's just a name change, I'm like, dude, like, kind of let it slide, type of thing. But I hear your point, and I definitely owe you more documentation.
Yeah. Normally, I think like at least our user base don't read the docs. So
I
we
know.
we realize that like no, they don't read docs. So ideally, the API could be as clean as possible, so they don't have to read the docs. And they don't
And I'll
manually.
tell you what I'm hoping is that they don't even read the cluster profile, and they just install the library, and they don't read the
For
the code and all that, and they won't care about the field name because they'll just install the library, set up whatever config we tell them to set for the library for our cloud, and that's it. It's like they should even have to care the same way they don't care about what the fields are in the kube config at this point.
yeah, it's two different customer though. The one who don't need to see the cluster profile names or those. Let me see. Who would need to see? Who wouldn't? Like Argo City guys doesn't matter to them. Like they wouldn't. That's kind of like implementation. They don't need to. It's
I think only cluster managers and credentials
yeah,
providers care
yeah,
about this protocol and the names and things like that. The rest
yeah,
of the people is like they're like, well, I've got a bunch of cluster profiles there. Great, they're reading for me because they're part of my fleet thing. Um, I
yeah.
don't think they'll manage them manually. Maybe they will. Maybe some solution. I mean, very likely they'll have some wrapping fleet management on top. Would be my guess. At least for GKE, that's what we're asking them to do. It's like, oh, register a cluster in GKE, and then we'll put them all together as a fleet. And I think you guys are going to do the same. OCM likely does the same because they already got their cluster list.
Can you say again? What do we do?
Like the cluster profile is not what the user manipulates directly
No,
to do the
no, yeah,
fleet. You
no,
have another object to deal with the fleet management, and then you reflect that fleet as cluster profile.
yeah. Fleet, more like a reflect that each working workload cluster, right?
Yeah, each cluster. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Each cluster of the fleet is like each cluster of the fleet.
Yeah.
So you have another concept for like membership and
Yeah.
what the clusters are. Um, I wonder if our intention is to make cluster profile more something that the user writes, or just we keep it more like second layer. It's like you got all that fleet management tools or multi-cluster management tools, and then they write cluster profiles. That way they could be consumed in the same way. But if we keep that multi thing, or if at some point cluster profile becomes the thing,
What thing?
like becomes the fleet manager, like you. So let's say you're an admin, right? Instead of so you create the clusters, but instead of registering, let's say with GKE fleet and doing your fleet management there, and then the GKE fleet reflects that in cluster profile, maybe the admin could create the clusters, but also create the cluster profiles manually there and say, oh, I created a cluster. Here's the cluster profile for it. And so they would do their fleet management directly with cluster profile. I
I
wonder
see.
if we could get to that point, or if we want to get to that point.
Probably not. That's kind of yeah. It would be hard.
Because it would be a lot of things to write, especially for the credentials provider. That's not easy to write. So that for that part, at least, that would be definitely annoying. For properties, doesn't seem too bad. It's fairly
the user
simple.
doesn't know the property. The admin doesn't know the property.
I mean, they created the cluster, so they would know, like, oh, I need to set like the region, the
But
blah blah blah. They
oh,
would know the properties, right?
like static properties, yes. Some dynamic ones, no.
Yeah.
And to make them actually the one to do the it's a totally different. At least I know. So I don't know if you know the history of cluster profile. So we initially wanted that to be. Initially, we started with, because again, every multi-cluster project has this member thing to register. It was to register.
To
But
replace
everybody
that, you wanted to replace that?
Slightly different. Then we realized that we cannot. It's a lot harder to replace this one because this was kind of the core of the entire project. So we come up with this one so that at least each project can still keep their thing, but they can integrate with third-party stuff. This becomes an integration point instead of a registration point. Yes, there is a registration cluster for every project, but too difficult to it's same as the scheduling API. Everybody has one, but it's too hard to come up with something that everybody can agree on.
You should make that point for the placement decision as well. I think this is the same pattern.
Same pattern, yeah, exactly same pattern. Yeah, can do the not can, I mean a lot harder to do the scheduling API, but this is the integration point. Same thing, integration point. So that make all these projects interchangeable for the third party, because it started with one request from Argo CD guys. They OCM want Argo CD to support them. Argo CD comes like say, I don't want to support like a single vendor. I want to support a API. So that next day someone else comes, I don't have to do it for everyone, like each one of you.
Yeah.
So that's again the same point for decision. Exactly same point for schedule decision.
Sounds good. Yep. All right, I'm gonna have to run, but thanks to both of you. Brian, have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And Dan, thanks for the talk. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.